If you're thinking about buying or selling a house in the Austin area, the first thing you're probably going to need to do is get a feel for the market. I'm going to break down the good, the bad, and the overpriced aspects of the Austin housing market. Back in 2019, U.S. News & World Report listed Austin as the #1 place to live in the entire United States. In fact, Austin was #1 for 3 straight years. U.S. News does this report every year. And by 2023, Austin had dropped out of the top 10, coming in at number 13, primarily because of increased housing costs. Now, on the one hand, this may be a sign that Austin has become a less desirable place to live. But on the other hand, it's still the 13th best place to live in the entire United States. And areas that Austin continues to shine in are strength of the local economy, low unemployment, and job creation. If you were to make a list of 100 different factors to determine which city is the best place to live, at the end of the day, if that city is attracting big name employers like Apple, Samsung, and Tesla, and those employers are building factories and office buildings, and are creating jobs that have salaries above the national average. If that city does all that, it will attract new residents. Because if a person can get a good job and make higher than average income, that person will eventually start buying things like houses. Now, the trade-off is that some of the people that have been moving to Austin have more buying power than the people that are already here. If you haven't tried to buy or sell a house in the last couple of years, let me try to give you an idea of what's been going on. Back in 2020, both Tesla and Oracle announced they were moving their corporate headquarters to Austin. At about the same time, companies like Facebook, Google, and Samsung announced that they were expanding their footprint in the Austin area. Now, this all happened right in the middle of the pandemic when work from home became the norm, which meant that tech workers from the Bay Area could keep their same high-paying jobs and live anywhere in the United States. During this time, Austin was ranked as the second most overvalued real estate market in the entire country. This was a time of aggressive bidding wars, where it became common to have 30 to 40 offers on a house, and buyers willing to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars more than the list price. Now that we have the gift of hindsight, a lot of those buyers are beginning to figure out that they may have overpaid for some of those houses. Now, things have cooled down since then, and we are beginning to see some pretty significant price reductions. Many sellers who are considering listing their home in today's market might think that they're still going to be able to get 2021 prices, but they eventually realize, especially when that house sits unsold for several months, that buyers are no longer willing to pay the same kind of prices. I'm going to show you some specific examples, but before I do, let me say this. I make these videos to provide information that will enable you to make better decisions if you're thinking about buying or selling real estate. But the only way I'll know if you like them or find them useful is if you leave a comment on the video, like the video, or subscribe to my channel. Also, if you think about buying or selling real estate here in the Austin area, I would love to help you out. You can shoot me a text or an email or schedule a phone call on the YouTube channel page. But enough about that. Let's talk about how difficult it's become to determine the actual value on a house in the Austin metro area. Now, the most basic definition of value is that a house is worth what a qualified buyer is willing to pay for it and a seller is willing to accept. If a seller listed their house for $500,000 and a buyer offered them $200,000, that seller is probably not going to accept that offer. But if that buyer offered $700,000, there is probably no seller in the history of real estate who would say something like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I can't accept that kind of money for this house. I will only accept what I have it listed for." That just does not happen. But those are exactly the types of offers we started to see over these last couple of years. Buyers with lots of cash found themselves in a very competitive market and made up their mind that they were willing to do anything it took to buy a house. When houses that were listed for $500,000 started selling for $700,000 and $800,000, what do you think everybody else in that same neighborhood thought? They thought their house must be worth that much too. And that is exactly how these inflated home prices got started. To understand how this works, let's consider how value is determined. The value of everybody's house in a specific geographic area is determined by recent sales of only a handful of homes in that same area. Let's say that a neighborhood had 500 homes that are valued around $500,000. If 10 or 20 of those homes sold for $700,000 in a 90-day period, everybody who decided to list their house after that would point to those 10 or 20 sales and say, "Those 10 houses sold for $700,000. That means that my house is worth at least $700,000 too." This works as long as buyers continue to be able and willing to pay those higher prices. Let's talk about tax appraisals. The tax appraisal office is charged with determining values of all the houses in a specific county every year. Those values are then sent to the tax assessor, who uses them to determine the property tax bill. Last year, literally every house in the 5-county Austin metro saw their tax appraisals increase 40 to 60%. Now, when homeowners first received those notices, it was both good and bad news. The bad news is that their property tax were going to go up because their house was suddenly worth more. But the good news was their house was suddenly worth more. On paper, that house might be worth 2 times the amount that homeowner had paid for it just 5 years ago. But this brings up 2 very important points. Number 1, you don't realize that gain until you actually sell the house. And number 2, your home value is not determined by what the county says it's worth, but by what a qualified buyer is willing to pay. Now, we all know that the U.S. economy has been struggling with inflation, and the Federal Reserve has been aggressively raising interest rates to bring that inflation under control. Once those interest rates started rising, all those big spenders disappeared from the housing market. And ever since July, the number of transactions and the prices for homes began to decline. Even though that tax appraisal might say that your house is worth $700,000, if nobody's willing to pay that much anymore, and the seller is motivated, that seller would begin to reduce the price of the house to find a number that a qualified buyer was willing to pay for it. Now, since this has been going on for over a year now, we are in a new tax year, and the Tax Appraisal Office has released new tax appraisals for 2023. Across the entire 5-county metro, homeowners have seen those appraisals decrease. Some more than others, but all of them have gone down. This is an example from North Austin. This area is not in as high demand as others closer to downtown, but I chose it because there are recorded sales both before and after the price run-ups. The appraisal in 2020 was not significantly higher than the sales price in 2017, but that's a 23% increase from 2020 to 2021, and a 60% increase from 2021 to 2022. Now, when that homeowner got that appraisal notice in 2022, they may justifiably have thought that the value of their house had doubled since when they bought it. But when they listed it for sale in late 2022, which was after interest rates began to rise and home prices began to decline, they listed it for $400,000, which was close to what the 2023 appraisal said it was worth, but still higher than what they could sell it for. The real appreciation based on the 2 sales represents a 45% gain in 6 years, which is good, but nowhere close to the crazy values established during the price run-ups. Now, this is only one example, and yes, there are areas of the Austin Metro where prices are still elevated. But this example does demonstrate that that seller came to terms with the realities of the market and priced their house for what a buyer was willing to pay for it. Not all sellers are willing to accept the realities of the market, and part of that is driven by the advice that they're receiving. Mark Sprague is a housing market analyst with Independence Title. In other words, a housing market expert. This quote was published in an article that appeared in the Austin American-Statesman. The values of local real estate have not gone down. The consumer can buy less due to the loss of buying power. Wait a minute there, Mr. Housing Market Expert. Are you telling me that when interest rates are artificially low, which enables buyers to pay more, and by paying more they drive up prices and values, those increases reflect actual value, but when interest rates rise, specifically to combat inflation and affordability, those lower prices are not a true reflection of value? It sounds to me like you might need to go back and read some fundamentals of economics textbooks. Or maybe he's trying to sell his house and he's hoping he's going to get 2021 prices for it. If you want to learn more about the trends in the median price in the Austin Metro, you should check out this video. It's going to give you a much different perspective on what's really going on out there in this current market. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel and ring the bell. That way you'll get a notification every time I post a new video.